in detail. I will briefly provide some information about the lab, which is a newish addition to Penn State, the talk series, and announcements regarding upcoming talks. The Children, Media, and Conflict Zones Lab was officially founded by myself in 2019. It implements the Rock Ethics Institute's Children, Youth, and Media in International and Global Conflict Zones initiative. The initiative is convened by myself. I'm a Rock Ethics Institute Research Associate, Assistant Professor of Telecommunications and Media Industries, and Affiliate Faculty of International Affairs, Comparative and International Education, African Studies, and Middle Eastern Studies. The initiative is also co-convened by my fellow Penn State faculty member Idan Shalev, Associate Professor of Biobehavioral Health and member of the Child Maltreatment Solutions Network, who I see is online here as well, and also by Wana Albu, who is an Associate Professor in the Department of Management, Communication, and Society at Copenhagen Business School. The initiative aims to help fill a scholarly void to best explore how media may be used to play meaningful roles in the lives of children and youth in conflict zones. Children and youth comprise a demographic majority of conflict zones. Because they are the most impacted, the initiative aims to shine a spotlight on media rights and uses that may best aid and empower them. Media constitute relatively accessible and non-threatening tools for intervention, yet scholarship does not adequately address the roles they play and could play for those who live in conflict zones, are impacted by, and are born of them. Anchored inside the Belisario College of Communications, the lab conducts its work through the transdisciplinary collaboration across the university and globally. To learn more about the lab or become involved with it, whether as a student, scholar, media or conflict management professional, or donor, please visit the lab's webpage and follow us on Twitter. Momentarily, I'll enter those URLs and handles into the chat. The Children, Media, and Conflict Zones Lab talk series promotes talks situated at the intersection between young people, media, and conflict zones, or attempts to foster path-breaking synergies across those areas. The talk series was inaugurated last April with an author meets critic book launch for my own latest book, Experiencing the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict, Children, Peace, Communication, and Socialization, which was published earlier this year with Cambridge University Press. For today's talk, following today's talk, our next upcoming talk will take place very soon, this Monday, November 8th, from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. The talk is entitled Afghan Children, 4 Decades of War, which will be presented by Wida Mehran, who is co-director for the Center of Advanced International Studies and lecturer, or as defined by the American academic system, assistant professor at the Department of Politics at the University of Exeter in the UK. We hope you will rejoin us on Monday. A list of upcoming talks during the spring and future semesters are posted as they become arranged on the lab's events page. I'll also post that momentarily in the chat, should you be interested in further talks. So in relation to today, I would like to thank our co-sponsors for today's speaker, namely African Studies, Anthropology, Geography, Middle Eastern Studies, and the School of International Affairs. I'd like to thank all of them for helping us to promote this talk. And finally, last but not least, I of course want to introduce our speaker in detail. Today's speaker is Rita Reis, who I'm very happy to have with us here today, and I greatly look forward to her talk. Reis is a Ph.D. candidate in social anthropology at the Institute of Social Sciences at the University of Lisbon in Portugal. Her academic interests pertaining to the context of refugees and forced migration, and with a special emphasis on the Western Sahara conflict, began with her master's thesis done at the University Institute of Lisbon. For that research, she approached the study of forced migration through an analysis of the daily life of borders among Sahrawi refugees. In her ongoing PhD research, which will be subject of her discussion today, She's exploring the ambiguity experienced by young people and how future is perceived. She's exploring this question through a study of Sahrawi students' migrations from the Sahrawi refugee camps located in Tindouf, Algeria, to Algiers and Extremadura Community in Algeria and Spain, respectively. Reis's research is financed by the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology, and she is author of publications like the book chapters Mobilities from the Exile, the Sahrawi Student Migrations, and Vacations in Peace, the Sahrawi Refugees in Between Political Activism and Spanish Solidarity. The latter is written in Spanish. I'm very excited again to have Rita here with us today and to get a first listen at what she's working on. And just sort of worth mentioning is that she's one of the few lucky people to have completed her dissertation or really any field research in the nick of time, just as the ongoing global pandemic began to shutter the possibilities of field work. And in her case, as it became apparent that she had to return to Portugal. So she was very lucky that she managed to get everything done and completed just before. And we get to be the benefit today to get a first crack at what she's been working on. And the title of her talk is Going Back, Coming Home, Future and Return Perspectives Among Sahrawi Youth Abroad. And with that, Rita, I will turn that over to you.
Thank you, Yael. Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I would like to thank Dr. Warshall for this invitation, as well as the Rock Ethics Institute's Children, Youth and Media International and Global Conflict Zones for sponsoring it, and the departments of African Studies, Anthropology, Geography, Middle Eastern Studies, and the School of International Affairs for co-sponsoring it. It is an honor and a privilege to be here today. I will share my screen in order to start my presentation. You please, if you see that I'm talking too much, too quickly or something, you please interrupt me and let me know. As Dr. Warshall told, I'm a PhD candidate in social anthropology within the specialization of political anthropology, where I observe the future perspectives among Sahrawi students from the refugee camps in Tindouf, Algeria, to the community, a Spanish community in Extremadura and Algiers. From recent refugee crisis to chronic well-known contexts in the MENA region, Sahrawis remain widely neglected among the academic and humanitarian debate regarding debates with post-colonialism, protracted situations, and immobilities among camp-based populations. As such, analyzing their individual and collective survival strategies for more than 4 decades in exile is of utmost pertinence. And this is particularly relevant and interesting from the youth point of view, those who were born in exile. I came to understand the importance of Sahrawi students' mobilities, both from the perspective of the national building process and personal experiences during my master's research in Smara refugee camp. Even though I focused on the daily life of borders, frequently people from all ages used to tell me when I was in Algeria or to talk about their life experiences in Cuba. And these experiences motivated my current doctoral research. So my current PhD research is based on a 24-month ethnography where I observe the daily lives and future perspectives among Sahrawi youth living in the Spanish community of Extremadura on the one hand, and in Algiers in Algeria on the other. And my fieldwork was conducted between April 2018 and March 2020. So I was really lucky because I was almost finishing my PhD when COVID-19, the pandemic started. And without excluding other methodological tools, such as interviews, for example, I privilege participant observation as my main ethnographic method. So in this communication, I will focus the Sahrawi youth transnational mobilities and how the possibility of return and settle permanently in the refugee camps upon graduation is perceived. From a transgenerational perspective, which I thought it could adapt this lab research since it focused on children. I examine how after 4 decades in exile, the paths and expectations of young people who left the camps to study contrast with those of their parents and siblings who remained in the camps. For that reason, and after a brief historical context, I somehow follow the trajectories of my interlocutors, starting with the first transnational period, holidays in peace, then the study period abroad, and finally becoming, or the desire to become, an economic migrant. So historically, the Sahrawi people, the Sahrawi population has been involved in various mobility processes associated with different socioeconomic contexts with deep, strong implications. It was a colony of Spain from 1884 to 1976, and then so-called Spanish Sahara. According to Garcia, until the 50s, the territory had less more than a military function. The beginning of the exploitation of phosphates marks the growth of interest in the colony, and in the 60s, which led to an increasing settlement around the main urban areas. In 1963, the Western Sahara is included in the list of non-autonomous territories of the United Nations, and it is monitored since then until today by the Special Political and Decolonization Committee, which is the 4th committee. In May 75, an official UN visit concludes the Polisarios Front, which is the liberation movement, political dominance in the territory. In October, the International Court of Justice ruled that, and I quote, there were no ties of sovereignty between the population of the territory and the Kingdom of Morocco and Mauritania, stating that the way forward to resolve the conflict was the application of the principle of self-determination through the free and authentic expression of the will of the populations of the territory. End of quotation. In November 75, Spain, Morocco, and Mauritania signed the Tripartite Agreement of Madrid, establishing the temporary administration of the Western Sahara between Morocco and Mauritania. 2 days later, together with the Royal Armed Forces, 350,000 Moroccans invaded the Western Sahara by north, and this would become known as the Green March. The Green March, alongside with the Mauritanian invasion from the south, resulted in the flight of about half of the Sahrawi population. Those who were once nomads in search of water and pastures that were described by Caro Baroja in the 50s as the sons of the cloud, suddenly found themselves involved in a failed decolonization process and locked up in refugee camps in southwest Algeria, Sahara Desert. Alongside with the struggle for independence, the Sahrawi people, led by Polisario, made of the refugee camps the headquarters of the national political project of the Sahrawi Arabic Democratic Republic, hereafter SADR, since its 1906 proclamation. And finally, it is very important to mention that on November 13, 2020, after the repression of by Moroccan military of a civilian Pacific demonstration in Guargarat Strip and facing UN silence, Polisario Front broke the 1991 ceasefire and agreement and returned to armed struggle. So if you look at the slide, the green arrow is where the refugee camps are located in Tindouf, and then the blue one is where Guargarat Strip is located. Just in terms, just to map the context. Differently from the recent images that come to us about the refugee crisis made up of newcomers and immediate aid in temporary camps, most of world refugees live in camps. In protracted refugee situations, experiencing what Bailey et al. Define as a permanent temporariness. However, many cross-camp borders integrated different types of mobilities, including those for economic purposes. By considering such mobilities and assuming that there are, and I quote Firin Kashmir here, overlapping and multiple refugee hoods, debates concerning exiled populations can more accurately address how refugees actively respond to displacement. At the same time, observing the voluntary movements of the forcibly displaced enables us to better acknowledge that even when living in protracted refugee conditions, people seek better conditions and meaningful lives. The Sahrawi case is pertinent as it intersects exile and different forms of mobility. In this sense, student mobility must be analyzed within a framework that considers the intersection of multiple mobility processes, including transnational movements, migrations, displacements for medical reasons, nomadism, vacation, and for sure, education. Now, starting from the beginning, which the first transnational trajectory among most of Sahrawi youth, the program Holidays in Peace. This program that has become known as Holidays in Peace, in Spanish Vacaciones en Paz, at the beginning of the 20th century has existed since 1976, the first year of exile, to use my interlocutor's terms. The program sent Sahrawi children to Algiers during the summer months when the temperatures in the desert frequently exceed 50 degrees. Since then, the program has operated continuously in different countries such as Denmark, Switzerland, Greece, the United States, France, Germany, and Italy, although Spain has always been the main destination. The program was interrupted last year during the COVID pandemic, but was replaced by another program in the Western Sahara, the liberated territories of the Western Sahara, and was called the Summer in the Land of the Grandparents, in order to connect children with their homeland. In Spain, the program is organized by the youth branch of Polisario and the Friends of Sahrawi People Association. It is a solidarity program for Sahrawi children between ages 8 and 12 that are hosted by Spanish families. The 2-month program main objectives are to provide better health conditions for children through access to specialized medical care, offer a more varied diet, and a temporary escape from extreme atmospheric conditions, such as the high desert temperatures, as well as to, and this is very important, to raise political and international awareness of the Sahrawi cause. According to Sahrawi leaders responsible for the project, as well as many Spanish association members, more than 10,000 children per year participated in the program during the 1990s and 2000s. From 2007 on, and especially during the economic crisis, the number dropped radically. And the year of 2019 registered an increase with approximately 4,000 participations, roughly the same number as 2019's edition. Gina Crivelo, Elena Fidian, and Dan Shatti considered Holidays in Peace a unique transnational network of care. In the Spanish case, the establishment of emotional bonds between Sahrawi children and host families enable a possibility of a long stay in Spain, as the words of Amal, one of my close interlocutor, reflect very well. Due to the cooperative relations and the strong solidarity network, like many of her compatriots, Amal ended her period of Holidays in Peace and was claimed by the host family, meaning that her host family asked the biological one to let her live in Spain with them to study. This was a necessary process enabling her to continue to study in Extremadura. Her story illustrates an experience shared by many of my interlocutors in Spain, adapting to a new country, a new school, and a daily life of a new family, very different from their summer routine and conditions back home. Like all families in the camps, Amal sent 2 daughters to study in Algeria, the main destination of Sahrawi students. And Amal was the only one to go to Spain. From that point in time, and until starting work in 2018, she visited the camps every summer. And here in the PowerPoint is a description of how she felt when she arrived in Spain to live permanently. However, these mobilities of Amal, for example, are part of a broader transnational nation-making through education process. They say there is no Sahrawi who does not have a family member killed in the war or a relative who studied in Cuba. Bashir, an interlocutor in his 20s from Extremadura, told me. This is particularly relevant, especially if one considers the deep relation between education, fight for liberation, and nation building process. I met Sidati in 2019's celebration of the Sahrawi National Day, February 27, organized by the West Branch of the Union of Sahrawi Students in Algeria, that took place in the Algerian city of Tlemcen. We have kept in touch since then. In his early 30s, Sidati told me about his study experience. He went to Spain in his 20s and stayed for a couple of years. After completing his degree, he came back to the refugee camps where he lives and works. Speaking of his arrival and return experiences, he acknowledged the differences between living at his age or, as in most cases, during childhood or adolescence. He too had two brothers who studied in Cuba. And his words regarding the arrival of his oldest brother are very illustrative of the consequences and characteristics of this transnational and transgenerational educational model, and were described by him literally as a movie story.
Rita?
Yes?
If you want to read those slides, take your time. I just want to.
Do you prefer me to read, or you want to read it by yourself?
I just want to let you know we have plenty of time, so you don't need to rush.
Okay. So, to fulfill the duty of a good Sahrawi citizen, education of children become both a national and an important parent goal personified in the mother. As the words of Sidati perfectly illustrate, there is pain, I can assure you that. A mother who has to send her children far away. It's a mix of feelings. She tried to console herself by saying that, yes, they are far away, I don't know anything about them, but when they come back, they will return to have to save all of their people. They will return graduated. These transnational trajectories contrasts with the idea of stagnation associated with populations living in refugee camps, and demonstrates the privilege given to certain types of movements. Additionally, this educational model contrasts with other refugee contexts where the impossibility of studying outside the refugee camps have created, and I quote Ho and van der Stoel here, a deadlock situation, not guaranteeing opportunities to learn through interaction with the outside world. More than building an independent state, the exiled Sahrawi population aimed to carry out the social revolution, which would weaken the tribal social order. In addition to serving this purpose, education guaranteed qualified human resources essential for the development of the future Western Sahara. In this sense, schools were among the first structures to be built in the refugee camps. National adult literacy campaigns were quickly established to address the profound illiteracy. Belloso Santisteban and Vinagrero Avila argue that Sahrawis were able to raise an educational system in the desert, mandatory with its own curriculum and ensuring universal access to all levels of education to both boys and girls. If an education population could, and I quote Farah here, better serve the causes of liberation and nation building, and due to the difficulties of establishing a national system in the refugee camps that could cover all levels of education, Sadr created a transnational education model by establishing different protocols. On the one hand, there were the bilateral protocols based on the principles of the non-aligned movement and the South-South cooperation with countries such as Algeria, Libya, Syria, and Cuba. On the other hand, these were cooperative and solidarity protocols with organizations in several European countries and worldwide. In terms of solidarity relations, Spain has been the main destination, distinguish itself from other destinations through the use of host families. While in other countries, students receive educational grants and are hosted in campuses. In Spain, they live with a host family, and they have a close relationship with the Holidays in Peace program, since it is very frequent that a child spends several summers with a family and then goes live with that family in the adolescence. Besides its educational component, in the Spanish case, it's very the protocols have a political aspect, as they promote support for strengthening of the Sahrawi cause abroad. So one must consider that these mobilities are a direct consequence as well as a characteristic of the exiled. As such, the student trajectories of Sahrawi youth must be analyzed in the light of the specifics of their context. Coming from a protracted refugee context, my interlocutors are the sons and daughters of a revolution which favored universal access to education, to a transnational model of education, as a fundamental element in the creation and maintenance of the state in exile, rather than to promote integration in the host country, in this case, Algeria. These movements bring together academic debates on refugee populations' mobilities, access to quality education in refugee camps, and the motivations as well and meanings, individual and collective, in accessing higher education abroad. However, what initially motivated these mobilities is today permeated by other factors, namely students' individual desires, particularly visible in post-graduation perspectives of my interlocutors and their families. In this sense, even if my interlocutors are not motivated by, let's call it, a global education hierarchy logic, the long decades of exile have fostered a change in study motivations. What was initially perceived, what was initially done on the behalf of the nation with a scheduled return date and the objective of applying the knowledge acquired in situ is now infused by individual perspectives that transcend these educational protocols and do not necessarily include a permanent return. And as I observed during my fieldwork, the perception of a permanent return is perceived by my interlocutors as the return to the refugee condition, with a lack of professional perspectives and economic stability. In a way, we could argue that education can break cycles of poverty, and in this particular case, giving rise to another exile. Here in the slide, there are two school education facilities. Of these photos were from my master research in Smara. The first one on my left, it's a school for blind people, and the other two is from a school for children with special needs. In the refugee camps, every camp, and there are 5, have schools for blind people and for children with special needs. And this is a very good example on how education is perceived in all its dimensions. In sum, student mobilities must be considered, and I quote Fidian Kashmir here, lived processes of immobility, departure, arrival, emplacement, and displacement, permeated by individual desires in a period strongly marked by hopes for economic migration. As I have been arguing, when analyzing Sahrawi student mobilities, it is relevant to observe transnational movements among exiled populations, especially if it is considered that these refugees move under official protocols. Accordingly, thinking about youth exile routes and their multiple destinations must necessarily begin at the starting point of all of them, the refugee camps in Tindouf, Algeria, the birthplace of my interlocutors, as well as the vast majority of the camp's exiled population. The idea of home, and I quote Selwyn and Frost here, encompasses attachments to spaces and places by both individuals and collectivities, end of quotation. If for Sahrawi youth, the camps overlap in being the place of birth and home, for their parents and grandparents, they are the place of refuge. Still, both youngsters and elders participate in homemaking processes, both in the daily practices and in the political and symbolic meanings attributed to that space, the physical locus of Sahrawi cause. They do it individually through the pursuit of a better life and for better life conditions, as well as collectively through the participation in Polisario Front and Sadr bodies. However, this leads to the displacement of several hundred students if we consider that education is one of these paths. Several hundred students annually, starting a long training journey away from home. In Spain, youngsters' integration in the lives of foster families produces a Spanish home and a family, and the distant but not distanced relationship with the Haima, which means tent in Arabic, but in this context means home and family in the camps, thus maintaining footholds in dual locations. As my fieldwork has shown, life and mobility experiences among those studying in Spain and Algeria vary from each other and from the experience of those who remain in the camps as well. Regarding education mobilities, in the Spanish case, the coming of age takes place within a host family and integrated in the host society, away both from their peers, family, and the refugee camps. The frequency with which Sahrawi visits their families and the camps can vary and not be accomplished years in a row due to Spanish residence permits and bureaucratic complications. Regarding the return, often they move directly from being a refugee student to an economic migrant. In Algeria, the coming of age is mainly through contact with peers and not through intergenerational daily relations. Contrary to their compatriots in Spain, students in Algeria go often to the camps, spending all summer vacations there, attending weddings, visit the family. As for the way post-study periods are perceived and planned due to the protocols between Sadr and Algeria, the return to the camps after finishing their studies is almost always certain, even if temporary. During my fieldwork in Algeria, female students appeared to accept a permanent return to the camps more readily than their male colleagues. The latter frequently expressed their desire to migrate to Spain or another European country. We all want to get out of here, and you choose to come. It was a late afternoon when Abdallah, Mahfoud, and I sat on a terrace on a busy avenue in the Algerian capital to drink some tea. We kept talking while observing the street full of people and walking in different directions. While we were talking about any number of things related to the Sahrawi cause, Abdallah was particularly interested in understanding the reason for me choosing to go to Algeria, underlining his desire to leave the country. The mobility routes of my interlocutors in Algeria are no less complex and varied than those of their peers in Spain. And at a certain moment, they participate in the same ones, namely through holidays in peace. Several of them maintain active relations with their former host families or had direct family members, brothers or sisters, even parents living in Spain. I recall a particular event that took place in Madrid regarding Sahrawi's youth participation in the political cause. I had traveled there with 3 interlocutors from Badajoz, and I was happily surprised when I saw that Mahfoud had traveled from Algiers to Madrid to attend that event. Sabah, Fatiha, and Zainabu, all undergraduate students in their early 20s, entered Algerian higher education after having lived in Spain for several years in Sabah and Zainabu's case. Like some youngsters in Spain, Zainabu also lost Arabic writing and reading skills and made the decision to go to Algeria to get closer to my roots, as she told me one day. For his part, Abdallah, like other male students, wanted to get out of here and go to Spain or somewhere, saying that the fact that not working on anything related to his academic career was totally irrelevant. Others, like Sidi, sought to combine studies in Algeria with seasonal work in the Balearic Islands. I need to help my family, So I go to the Balearics in the summer, and then I return in September, October. Last year I went to France, he told me. As I could observe, he used to come back after October, which made his academic life much harder, as for any working student. Although Abdallah's situation was relatively representative of my male interlocutors in Algeria, the desire to have studied in Algeria was present in several of my interlocutors in Spain. As Amal told me when we were talking about my fieldwork there, I would like to have studied in Algeria. All my sisters studied there. To which Beidid, another interlocutor, confirmed, me too. It is very interesting to observe that even though aware of the hard living conditions of Algerian campuses, studying there was perceived as a desired experience since it's part of the circuits of human mobility of many Sahrawi students' trajectories. This happens precisely because Algeria has always been the study destination par excellence, and there are Sahrawi students in Algeria in every Sahrawi families in the refugee camps. This does not mean, however, that Hamal or Beidid perceived their roots has less Sahrawi mobility circuits, but acknowledged that they would have liked to have similar experiences to those of their kin. In Spain, Hamal and Beidid were close interlocutors. Both in her 20s, their mobility experiences were quite different. Hamal participated in Holidays in Peace in several editions. Then she was claimed by her host family and settled permanently in Spain at the age of 13. She graduated from university. She got a BA in education, and until she started to work in 2019, she traveled to the refugee camps every summer, and until the confinement resulting from COVID-19. She just worked in a children therapy center just outside Badajoz, and since she arrived in Spain, and especially after starting to work, her periods in the refugee camps don't exceed 1 month. A couple of years younger than Hamal, Beidid never participated in Holidays in Peace, since she arrived in Spain at the age of 6 years old due to medical reasons. Beidid interspersed her life in Spain with longer visits to the camps. During my research, she finished high school, and while considering future training, she worked seasonally in the Balearic Islands. For Amal, Beidid, or other interlocutors alike, working means sending money to their families in the camps, and is something perceived as a duty. I have to help them, you know. There are no jobs in the camps, they used to tell me frequently. Moreover, sending these remittances back home was frequently referred to as a main reason to stay in Spain, but not the only one. For those who studied in Spain, the lack of professional perspectives on the camps, as well as the idea of there's nothing to do there, were also presented as non-return motives, even though they missed their families. For my interlocutors, remaining in Spain and trying to find a job was the preferable option. Nevertheless, the social negotiations of the transition from being a student to an economic migrant in the refugee camps are not linear. The non-return upon completion of the studies confounds the objectives of the educational programs, contributing to the emptying of the refugee camps, and further exacerbates the lack of highly qualified professionals, particularly in health and education domains. This aspect differentiates these youth both from those who return, their siblings, or for example, Sidati that I just mentioned, and the elders who remain in the refugee camps. Besides the differences between youngsters and elders' mobilities regarding definitive return, there are others. And the story of Sabih's siblings, an interlocutor from the camps, is very, I think it's illustrative. We have a problem that the world does not. We have an experience. Every year, we have sent our generations out. For example, in my family, we are 4. I studied in Syria. My brother was 14 years in Cuba. My sister, 7 years in Libya. and the other sister stay in the camps. I have a culture, a life experience, my brother too, my sister that studied in Libya, something else. And we live in the same family. It's the same flower, but it's not the same petal. Whereas in the past, the differences created by educational experiences were observed upon return to the camps, today some return and others do not. Moreover, there are those who stayed in Spain upon completing their studies and others who arrived there as economic migrants in adulthood. If in the past migration was difficult to pursue and social frowned upon, today one of the biggest challenges of my interlocutors, especially female ones, they face is social pressure of living and working in Spain while maintaining an ideal model of proper behavior in the camps and or in the Sahrawis community in Spain. Additionally, remaining in Spain is accompanied by feelings of guilt, or as a close interlocutor pointed out, Mali, she called it the fucking remorse. For being away, for not returning, for having the chance of a better life while their families remain in the camps, unable to escape from that poor living conditions. Several authors have noted that the return to the camps after a long period of absence has prompted to criticism and a certain level of rejection, especially for females. My interlocutors were very much aware and concerned about this, especially due to the negative connotations of living in Spain, which is perceived as westernized. I don't know about you, but I'm not the same person here and there, Beidid told Bashir. Although Bashir admitted paying attention to his behavior and way of being while he was on the refugee camps, he concluded that he put less effort into altering his behavior than Beidid did. In sum, besides the political views of the conflict being shaped by generational experiences, Sahrawi youth living in Spain and making annual visits to the camps reveal important generational gaps. More specifically, the changes in education programs, outcomes, and how these young people build their life projects, focusing more on an individual rather than collective perspectives. However, very present during my research was the constant worry related to how their behaviors were observed and questioned, especially but not only by elders. Despite the transgenerationality of these student movements and later migratory ones, the experiences of my interlocutors are quite different from that of their parents and grandparents. Also, their expectations, mostly the individual ones, related to how future is shaped, are radically different. Whereas until the 1990s, most returned to the camps and participated in situ in the construction of the nation and struggle for independence, the return today is conceptualized in different ways and does not necessarily entail permanence. The lack of qualified employment in the camps has led to increased migratory movements, and as I just said, especially male ones, constituting a new cycle of movement. As Gomez Martin argues, by developing inventive strategies, Sahrawis can maintain their fight for independence and, at the same time, improve their lives, a characteristic aspect of the temporality of the exile in which they live. In Spain, the commitment with the political cause can be observed through youth participation in solidarity associations and the youth and students branches of Polisario. In Algeria, students tend to be organized in youth and students branches of Polisario, organizing several events per school year with hundreds of students attending to it. However, the ambivalence of the temporality of the meanwhile, a time of no peace nor war, lived until November 13, 2020, where economic migration is perceived as a doable life solution, has also changed this program's outcomes and creates generational ambiguities. Nayat left the refugee camps at an early age. She went to Italy and later to Spain, where she did most of her education. She married Hassan, also a Sahrawi resident in Spain since a young age. Both are highly skilled and very active in the Sahrawi cause. As Hassan told me, I contribute more to the cause from Spain, stating that he did not intend to return to the camps. Nayat and Hassan represent a new generation of Sahrawis trained in Spain. They met in Spain, they got married in the refugee camps, established their careers in Spain, and actively contribute to the cause without the prospect of definitive return. And this talk from Nayat, I think it is very illustrative. I talked to Hassan regarding the possibility of coming back. And he told me, imagine we go back, we have our khaima, and then what? Don't forget that you're Sahrawi, you're not Spanish. My brother used to tell me every time I came to Spain. Amal's narrative expresses something common among my interlocutors, especially female ones, keeping up with the family expectations and behave properly in Spain. Leaving the refugee camps to study and becoming an economic migrant is a negotiated process. And this process entails balancing between helping the family in the camps, participating in the cause, and maintaining one's Sahrawiness. Although transnational mobilities originated and has and remain a political project of the government in exile, more than 4 decades of refuge have changed these programs as well as family and youngsters' expectations. Whereas before the parents returned to the camps and to the cause, today youth participate in the cause differently and from abroad. Through the trajectories of my interlocutors, representing common path among Sahrawi youth, I showed how these young youth lives are permeated by transnational movements and shaping their life prospects. Participating in holidays in peace, being claimed by one's family, and becoming an economic migrant is a characteristic trajectory of Sahrawi exiled youth presently in Spain, or going to participating in holidays in peace, studying in Algeria, going back to the camps, and trying to migrate is very common in Algeria, in the Algerian case. Thus, it is possible to observe at the intersection of exile, educational mobility, and migration in the search of a better future, and as well as a strategy of getting out of protracted exile. To analyze these transnational experiences is to perceive, and I quote Shati here, how second and third generation refugees identify themselves and structured the myths of origin, end of quotation, and how they participate in the political cause, fulfilling the goals of the educational programs. It is also to acknowledge that there are different ways to be a good Sahrawi citizen and fulfill their duties. In sum, I intended to demonstrate how this generation of the future embeds their expectations in the present and adapt the ideal model through flexible use of the conditions and tools available to them, always seeking to achieve a meaningful life while wishing for the independence of Western Sahara. Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know, maybe I was too quickly. I'm not sure, but please, I look forward to hear your comments, your questions, anything you like. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rita, for that fascinating and thought-provoking presentation. We'll open it up now to questions, and please don't be shy if you want to turn on your cameras. I'm sure Rita would be happy to see actual audience members. I think that's often a little disconcerting in Zoom not to see people's faces. Of course, if you want your cameras off, that's fine, but don't feel shy if you want to turn it on. So I have many questions for you, as I'm sure you know. I'm just going to start it off with just a few clarification questions I want to ask that might help the audience situate your findings. And then if you either want to just raise your virtual hand and then we'll call on you, or if you prefer to post in the chat, I could read your question, and we'll go from there. Keep it fairly flexible.
Can I ask you something? Sorry to interrupt. Normally, we take three or four questions in a row, and then we answer all of them together, or you do it one question, one answer.
In the US system, we do 1-1, right?
Okay.
Which I think I mentioned to you is unlike the majority of the world, but
okay, no problem. No problem.
As you wish. Would you prefer we select?
Whatever you prefer, for me, it's perfect.
Okay, so then we'll keep the system that more people are used to here, but yes, it's an anomaly how it works here.
No problem at all.
Okay, so I had, I guess, 3 questions you could say that I'm collecting together, just clarification. So you presented for us on the data you collected in 2012 and then 2019 to 2020, if I understood properly. And so I was wondering if you could tell us, first of all, the age range. I mean, we got a sampling, but what was the youngest and what was the oldest? The number of children and then students you spoke to, if there's some kind of number there. And then also how you sample them. And I know this is more ethnographic than, you know, solely interviews. So if there wasn't a formal sampling, if you could tell us a little bit how you found people, if it was through the youth organization or the student organization, sort of how you embedded yourself into the communities in Extremadura and also in Algiers, so we can have a better understanding of that. And then I see we already have one person with a question, so we'll proceed.
Okay, so thank you for your questions. Regarding the age range, there are 2 groups here. There are the children in Holidays in Peace program, which I never interviewed formally because they were children and they were outside of the scope of my research, but I did ethnographic observation with them as well. So we are talking about children officially between 8 and 12, but unofficially younger, from 6 to 7 to maybe 13. This is one group. And then in Spain, we are talking about Spain. In Spain, my youngest interlocutor, I mean privileged interlocutors, was 18 years old. And the oldest maybe 35, between 18 and 35. Of course, there are other members of the Sahrawi community, older, but regarding the youth sample, the number of children, well, I have 60 long deaf interviews with Sahrawi Polisario representatives, members of the Solidarity Associations, Sahrawi students, Sahrawi youth, those who were students and are not students anymore. So I had in Spain a group of 7 privileged interlocutors, and then a broader group, maybe, I don't know, 15 to 20. And then in Algeria, which I will just answer right away. In Algeria, my integration was different from Spain. In Spain, I moved to Spain. Then I had a contact from the office in the Polisario representative in Portugal, which gave me the contact of the Polisario representative in Extremadura. And from then on, it was a snowball method. I used to meet with someone who would give me the phone numbers of any number of people. And I should mention, it is very easy to do research, and you know it, to do research with Sahrawis, because they are always available to participate and to give the contact of anybody else. So it is very easy, because every time I used to meet with someone, they used to say, oh, I will give you the contact of this guy and that guy. They will love to talk to you. And it was true. And then on the moment after that, those 2 would give me another contact. So it was truly snowball. In Algeria, it was through snowball. It was through contacts that I had in Spain previously as well, through family members of my privileged interlocutors, for example, who told me, you go to Algeria, you find that guy. He will help you to know students and so on and so forth. And so it was. I had this institutional relation with the South Embassy. They gave me the numbers. For example, there are 3 1,700 college students in Algeria, Sahrawi college students in Algeria, and several thousand, we are talking about college students, and then several thousand of students from 11, 12 years old until college. So it's a huge number. And it's a very important, so that's why Algeria is an important Sahrawi student destination. When we are talking about thousands of students. And then I was settled in Algiers, and I used to move to other campuses in another cities since I was a student, and I had a student visa. I could enter and I could stay in residency campuses with the students. That was very, very helpful and helped me a lot to know better, to share the experiences in informal, besides interviews, and in informal contexts. I think I answered. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you. No, you definitely answered it. And yeah, if other people have clarifying questions, feel free to ask those, as well as, digging deeper. I'm gonna unmute Triwik and let her ask her question. Please, Triwik.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Oh, hi. I'm sorry. I'm wearing mask because I'm in a public space, and then yeah, I'm using my phone basically to join this webinar. Hi, Dr. Washal. Thank you so much for organizing this event, and hello, Rita. Nice to meet you. Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. It's very fascinating, and then this is a very amazing study, I think, and yeah, this is something that I'm also interested in. Actually, I have tons of questions, but I try to to be more concise. So the first one is, what are some of the challenges that you encounter while conducting your study? So it can be maybe cultural challenges, or maybe language, maybe, and then safety and security, and then because you conduct this study in two different countries. And that's my first questions. And then my second question would be, you already mentioned earlier how you contacted the students, and as we know that refugees are vulnerable populations, what was your approach in your method in approaching them? I mean, and besides, and some of them are minors, I believe, and then maybe the consent and everything, and is there any formalities basically to get the statement from them? Yeah, so yeah, those are my questions. Thank you very much.
And Rita, to give you context, Triuk is beginning her doctoral studies, so she's looking to you for some sage advice, so you have that context.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your questions and your comments. Regarding the challenges that I encountered, well, I'm from anthropology, so we are supposed to go to the fieldwork and stay there longer and integrate and be part of our interlocutors' lives. That's a fact that we learn from the BA from day one. But there are practical questions that you learn by doing it. No one is telling you that you should adapt this way or that way. You go to trying to observe the situation. In my specific case, within the context, I went to the refugee camps in 2012 from my master's. I went to a family, and then I had integration through a family. From the family to the neighbor, then the neighbor to the broader context. I was a family member. This is one aspect which facilitates very much, since you are integrated in a family and you are protected by that family. Here in my PhD, I had no family. Well, I eventually had a Spanish family. I was kind of adopted by a Spanish family, but to start my fieldwork, I didn't know anybody. So I just organized things. I made my project, I organized stuff, and I just moved to Spain because we are neighbor countries. It's easy. And then I started to talking with people. Even I didn't interviewed minors So regarding the consent, here in Portugal, we don't have that very straight consent forms that, for example, the AAA in the US has. I mean, we don't have that. So we just talk to people. We ask them if they allow us to use their data or not. We change their name, some practical details, and then we use the data. If they don't want us to use, don't use it, we don't use it in theory, in a principle. So most of the challenges, I would say I encountered them in Algeria. It started with the visa application, with the enrollment in the university, with all the bureaucratic issues. They took me a year to obtain the visa, the institutional agreement, so on and so forth. To move to Algeria as a woman by herself, there are gender issues that I was very concerned about. How to save my honor, let's call it like this, in order to protect my research and to protect myself. So I had 2 or 3 male interlocutors which were very close, and I was like their sister. We had a brother-sister relation, and this was very important because I was perceived as not only as the researcher, but the sister of that guy or the other one. And to be the sister of someone entails a proper behavior. So, for example, I'm a smoker. In Algeria, women do not smoke on the street. So I did not smoke on the street. In Algiers, for example, after 6 o'clock, women do not walk in the street if they don't have anything very particular to do. So I did not do that. So I tried to integrate through the social rules working there. And I had another thing in which a couple of days ago, I was talking about a female colleague. She did her fieldwork in India, and we were talking about gender issues. She did her fieldwork in India, and her husband went with her to fieldwork. My husband did not go with me, but he was somehow present in a way that he used to send presents to those that were my brothers. So every time I came back home, when I returned to Algeria, I used to send a gift from my husband to them. So they didn't meet, but they were somehow connected by these reciprocity relations, to use the Moss term. I think it was very important because it's different when you are a female doing research and a male, no matter the context. It is very different, in my opinion, when you are a female doing research and a male doing research, but we have to keep up with that. It was easier for example, with the girls in the campuses. I used to stay with them. I just went there and stayed there years or weeks in a row. And then with the boys, I used to meet in public spaces. And regarding the vulnerable populations, it must be said that Sahrawis are refugees, in fact, but in Algeria, they are, let's call it, foreigners. Because since Algeria recognizes the Sadr and gave the physical space where the refugee camps are hosted to the management of the Polisario, they are considered foreigner students. So they are there like a student from Nigeria, from Mali. They are not considered refugees in that sense. And in Spain, they are perfectly integrated in the host family. So they are not refugees in that context as well. I think I answered anything. If I didn't answer, please let me know.
Yeah, you did answer my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, if I'm allowed to have like follow-up questions.
Let's just see if there's any other questions.
Okay.
If there aren't, please,
good.
are there any other questions? So Erin, if you want to go ahead, and then if there's no one else, we'll come back to you, Truc, if that's okay. Go ahead.
I'll be quick, Triwick. So thank you for your talk. It was really, really enlightening. I just wanted to clarify a few things that you said. So you said that, I want to make sure I'm getting this right. So it seems like there is a trend, not that you have like raw data or anything, but there seems to be a trend that people are not returning as much as they used to, especially among males. But what is happening is like the goal of the education program is being met, in that the national identity and the commitment to the cause is still prevalent, or is still like a major thing. So no matter where they live, there's still a commitment to this Polisario nation building. And I wonder, I mean, at least that's the interpretation of the people that have left, the economic migrants. Is that true of people in the camps, of Polisario themselves? Like, do they feel like the education abroad is still serving its mission, or one of its missions? And are they still as committed to it as they used to be? That's my question.
Okay, thank you very much. You got the idea right. And in fact, there are these debates even within the Sahrawi community abroad, which is studying and staying, and studying and coming back. So for my interlocutors in Spain, they are committed to the Sahrawi cause. I mean, not all, I mean, we're talking about generally. And but for those who return to the camps after graduation, of course, there is frustration. There is lots of frustration that, having studied, for example, I have an interlocutor who studied 21 years in Cuba. He lived 21 years in Cuba, 17 in a row, and then he came back. He did his BA thesis, and then he came back again. And then in totally 21 years in Cuba. When he arrived, he was shocked. Everything had changed a lot within the refugee camps, the Sahrawi society. He was, as he told me, more Cuban than Sahrawi. And he was highly qualified and faced a scenario of nothing to do. And I recall perfectly of him telling me, it's not the 36 years that we lived here, is how many more we are going to live here, because we are not, we can't take another 36 years. So there is lots of frustration for youngsters who live in the camps on the one hand, but there are, for example, the case of Sidati that I presented. He's a high qualified professional. He works in, he's a filmmaker, he works in his domain, but he's a minority. But this, and I recall a specific call when I was in the conversation when I was in the camps regarding supporting or not supporting Polisario. And from my experience, and I'm sure that must be others, but from my experience, youth tend to support Polisario, even if they want a change of leaders. I mean, changing leaders within the Polisario and not putting Polisario away and creating another movement. This is from my experience in my PhD as well as in my master's. Is this how I perceive it? But yes, there is lots of frustration when you come back and you have nothing to do. And that was a serious reason for why, for example, youth in the camps tended to prefer the return to armed struggle than a pacific solution, because they were living the harsh conditions in situ without living in Spain, which is considered a comfortable life. And on the contrary, my interlocutors in Spain tended to prefer a pacific solution organized by the UN. However, what I think it's very interesting is that when the ceasefire ended, everyone supported it. Those who were in favor of the war, those who were in favor of a peaceful solution, that was a collective decision, and they supported it. I had even interlocutors who left, who canceled their degrees and went to enlist in the army. I'm not sure if I answered your question, if I went in the direction that you were asking.
No, I think that's really fascinating. And I, especially the point about, you know, when faced with returning to nothing and kind of the day-to-day boring, I want to say boringness of the camps, like they're ready for something to change and they want to be part of that, is what I'm getting. But if they're not part of that, they maybe are not so excited to be back.
They are, from my experience, they are very proud of that refugee camps because it's a state in exile. I mean, it's run by, has a state, it has ministries, schools, dispensaries, pharmacies, schools, it has even an university. So they are very proud that they are not managed by any international organization. And they are very proud that their mothers built it. While their fathers were in war, their mothers built that space. So, and when they talk about home, they talk about there. Even if they are not intending to live there, they have their house, their Heimat. For example, I witnessed weddings that they were living in Spain, but they made a house there without intending to live there permanently, but they built a house there close to their mothers. So it is, on the one hand, this proud, and when you have something, you just have to go there to feel well. And on the other side, there's a revolt, because you should not have been there, because it's so inhospitable, 50 degrees in the summer and less 20 degrees in the winter. You should not have to be there and be born there. And this revolt is very connected with the situation lived in the Western Sahara, particularly the situation of the occupied territories by Moroccan army, which they face every single day, very strong violations of human rights. And those are their family members. So this is very frustrating for them in this sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Truic, do you want to ask your follow-up question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Yeah. So I was just wondering, what are exactly, your reasons, or are there any backgrounds why you specifically chose the Sahrawi communities as your study? I mean, because there are like millions of refugees out there, like millions of refugee communities out there. So I was just curious, like, why you pick this particular community. And then my second question, sorry, I'm asking too many questions.
No problem.
Yeah, second question is, when you're about to go to this camp, I'm wondering, because some camps are supervised or under some agencies, like for instance UN agencies. So I'm just wondering, is there any other, some kind of like bureaucracy? Do we have to submit permits or something like that? So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So I just moved my slide to a picture of the refugee camps. Well, regarding to go to the refugee camps, you have to be invited. You have to be invited by Polisario in this case. So these refugee camps are not managed by any international organization. They are managed by SADR and Polisario. So you have to receive a formal invitation to go there. Once you have this formal invitation, you apply for the visa, to Algerian visa, and then you have a visa to go straightly from Algerian airport to the refugee camps. And one particularity of this is when you arrive in Algeria, which is common in many countries, you fill a form, name, address, where are you going, how long are you staying, so on and so forth. And you do that. And when you arrive in Tindouf, which is the military airport for the refugee camps, you file another form to enter, to get in the refugee camps, which are the SADR, the Sahrawi Republic headquarters. So this is on the one hand. Regarding my background, it's not a very interesting story. My parents went to a talk in our city, and I don't know, I couldn't attend. When I got home, my parents told me, oh, we went to a talk. There are these refugee camps that are managed by women. And then I recall, it was 2005. I remember that, but it stayed there. When I started to think about my master's thesis, I just remember that. And I thought, hey, let's go to those camps managed by women. And this is how it started. It's not an Oric story. It was random, almost random, I would say.
Thank you very much.
Other questions?
I also have another one if no one else is going. So I'm in Dr. Warshall's senior seminar right now that's studying communications in Western Sahara. And I'm curious about, you mentioned that the folks in the refugee camps or even on the holiday are still in contact with the occupied West, like their family members in occupied Western Sahara. And I was wondering if you could just speak to how they communicate with them and how close those relationships, like how they maintain those relationships being so separate over all these years for decades.
Okay, well, now things are much easier due to WhatsApp, Facebook, so on and so forth. But until the early 2000s, there was almost no contact at all. I have an interlocutor who told me a story which I think it's very illustrative of this situation. His grandparents lived close to Laayoune, in the capital of Western Sahara. And his grandparent worked in commerce. He used to travel to transport stuff. They had 3 daughters, 1 daughter and 2 twins, 2 female twins. And every time he used to travel, he used to take one of the girls to travel with him to see the other parts of the Western Sahara and so on. When the Green March when the Moroccans invaded the Western Sahara, he was in Dakhla with one of the children, one of the twins. And his grandmother took the 2 girls and ran away to the refugee camps. They didn't know anything for decades of the grandfather and the other sister. They met. It was a pure casualty because the sister of this boy, Hamdi, her sister was studying in Algeria, and that she had a teacher who spent an Algerian teacher who spent vacation in Morocco. And she gave him a letter, and I don't know how the letter arrived, but in fact, she wrote him a letter saying, I'm looking for this guy, and this guy, he's the son of that one, that one, that one. When the school started again, he had an answer for her. He had found her family. And then they put them in contact through letters. What happened was that the grandfather was arrested for many years, as well as the aunt, which was adolescent. She lived with some family, and he was living the father, and then he was arrested for years, more than 10 years. When he got released, he tried to go to his home, and when he got there with the girl, he saw that the house was occupied by Moroccans, and he left because he was terrified of being arrested again. And they met eventually, not with the grandfather because he died, but the sisters, the twin, they met in Mauritania through this communication of letters. And it is a very beautiful story. And that happens a lot because in that moment, there were, of course, the visits, the UN visits, which refugees could go to the occupied territories and the other way around. But it is very difficult. It was very difficult because when Sahrawis from the occupied territories used to travel, the Moroccan military would go on them. But now it's easier with all the communication models. And they do have, besides being fathers and brothers and sisters, and then besides the kinship, there is as well the whole the whole people situation regarding the political, meaning they are my people and they are suffering a lot. So there are 2 levels here: the family one and the broader one. Let's call it like this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? So I'll follow up with another one of my questions. So one of the things, so a lot of what you're saying, I found also from my interlocutors very similar. I mean, it's no surprise, right, that we're finding similar responses about the experiences and sort of dislocation in the way in which it's experienced as part of their transnational migration. So one of the things for me that I'm not quite sure about is the relationship between sampling and what we're finding. So, there's the confounded problem in which we go through this research, right, is that the starting point, we all have to go through the same starting point of having permission to conduct the research, and then inevitably going through the snowball process. And so I always wonder, are there people, I see it in my own research, but I also wonder in yours, that we may not be capturing, that may be having a different experience. And so there's a few questions related to that. One, with the Vacations in Peace program. So I know there's sort of, you mentioned official and unofficial, right? You gave an example of, officially 8 to 12, I think you said, but unofficially 6 to 13. So there are things I've been told of, part of the program officially is to give greater priority, for example, to children with medical needs, right? So that they can obtain those needs or services in Spain. So one question is, along that line, and also the official age range, to what extent have you seen that the children you observed, that it met the sort of official rubric of 8 to 12? Was that, 90%? If you could say that, and to what percentage do you think were those children who had special medical needs? The other question is just if you ever had a sense in people you're not capturing. I mean, as you said to me, Sahrawis are very excited to participate in the research process. And on the one hand, I have no doubt that that is authentic, in the sense that that is part and parcel, that they feel it's very important that they're contributing to the cause by participating in the research. Right? I mean, that's very evident. But then I sometimes wonder, are there people who may not be participating, right, that we're not getting to because they're more disappointed in Polisario? And again, I'm finding the same things as you. Even if they're disappointed, they still support the cause, and they're very in favor. But that's sort of the other question, is if you saw any inkling of that, of people who may not be participating, and so you're not getting their narrative.
Okay, so regarding holiday, I'm not sure of calling it holidays in peace, vacation in peace. Well, normally I'm not it, but regarding it is very difficult to know for sure how old are the kids, because sometimes they have nutrition problems, or if they are or if they are very skinny or very small, we cannot know for I'm not sure how old they are. So, for example, I give the example of my Spanish host family. I knew that one of the girls that they were receiving was older, and I knew, so did my host mom did. The case is this: the family hosted 2 twins from the beginning, and then during one summer, one girl was, let's call it, expelled from her host family. And this is a very important issue that one should address, that it is a minority, but there are problems with the children, and sometimes they are exposed to very stressful situations regarding their relations with their host families. It's a minority, but it happens. So the girl was, let's call it, expelled from her host family, and my host mom hosted the girl in order for her to not come back to the refugee camps earlier. So in theory, the 3 girls had the same age, but they clearly did not. And I could perceive that for different reasons that my host mom. The way I perceived that was the handwriting, Arabic handwriting. Her handwriting was much more perfect than of the twins. So, and she was already studying in Algeria. So she was older. And my host mom realized it through other ways of the daily life. So she was older, but I'm not quite sure In the papers, in the ID papers, she was not older, which it tends to happen a lot. Sometimes papers, the ages are very messed up. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, the experience that I have from the host families that I followed is that they start with the program, and then they ask for that specific child. I host Muhammad this year, and until he's old enough, until he's in the age of limit participation, I just want to receive Muhammad. And then when he reaches the age limit, I want to receive a Muhammad siblings. So it they tend to prefer, and this is a debate within the solidarity movement associations, because some families tend to prefer to give this let's call it family relation. I receive Muhammad, his brother, his sister, and so on and so forth. So even if they have health conditions or not, I'm connected to that family. And I see that, I observe that there are children with specific needs, but I'm not aware. I followed the vacaciones in holidays in peace in Extremadura. There were around 100 children, but there were no specificities regarding special needs. There were children who had stomach diseases, eye diseases, and so, but they were not there because of that. They were there because they enrolled in school and they were chosen, or they were claimed by host families. And then the second question regarding the sense of people not capturing it. Well, I saw it in the refugee camps. When I somehow moved from the, let's call it official dimension to unofficial dimension, when you start hanging around, staying, they saw your face, and for sure you must have that experience as well. They see you 1, 2, 3 days in a row, and then they start talking, small talks over tea. I saw it there, and there was disappointment. But in the refugee camps, I found people against Polisario, but it's natural. And I found people against Polisario leaders, but not against Polisario itself. But and with a deep relation with gratitude for what Polisario have done for them. I'm not sure if you found the same things. And then in Spain, it's interesting in a way that students are, in the beginning, I thought that since they were hosted by families, they were very much aware and very much present in the daily life of the Sahrawi political cause. But it's not like that all the time. Sometimes they are very much aware of all that situation. So there are cases that they don't know nothing about. They know Polisario, yes, but not much more than that, because they do not participate much more, as in fact. And there are cases I found. I had, in all my research, in my PhD research, I had one interlocutor, and he was older. I mean, he was 37 at the time, that told me that he didn't feel at all represented by Polisario, but at all, in any way. He was the only one. But of course, there are more. I mean, my snowball was through my social relations, and we tend to socialize with people more or less like us. So as my interlocutors, I tended to socialize with their friends, their cousins, their siblings, who had a more or less participation like them. So in a way, snowball method, it has a selection as well. Sometimes we can only do it, we can do it differently if we break that snowball and we start another one. But I'm not quite sure if I answered your question, and I would like to know about, if perhaps in another moment, about your findings as well regarding that.
Sure, and I just want to acknowledge, because we're out of time, so if people need to leave, I want to let people, if you need to leave, we're going to stay and talk, but I do just want to acknowledge and thank everyone for participating and joining us as part of the inaugural Children Media and Conflict Zones talk series. I hope you enjoyed this. Stick around if you want to hear more. And again, the next upcoming talk is Monday. I believe it's at 1:30 p.m. On Afghan children with Rita Reis. So thank you again.
Thank you all for being present, those who have to leave. Thank you very much.
So yeah, let me first see if there's any other questions.
Anyways, those who have to leave, or even if they don't have to leave and they want to send me any comment, any question, so this is, I'm writing my PhD thesis right now, so any comments, any questions, so are more than welcome in order for me to reflect about my research and what I'm doing. So I leave here my email address for those who want to write to me. I would thank you all comments, sharing anything. You are more than welcome. And I thank you a lot. If you write asking me questions, tough questions, please.
Great, and I just put your email in the chat if people will take you up on that for questions. So, whoops, it looks like, okay. So maybe, I don't know if we should officially, I guess we could stop the recording at this point. Jill?